Before you dive into editing your projects in Premiere Pro 2, you may find it helpful to modify some of the system settings. These are called preferences, and in this tutorial movie, I'll show you some of the primary preferences that you might want to specify. To do this, we're going to go ahead and click the Open Project button, and in the 02_interface_essentials folder, I'm going to click on Exercise 4, and I'm going to click Open. Now, some of the settings that you've seen so far in these tutorials are saved with the project. When you create a new project, those settings no longer exist and they'll revert back to their default settings. However, preferences in Premiere Pro 2 are saved with the application, so they will affect every single project file that you open up from here on out. To access the application preferences, you choose Edit, Preferences, and you can choose from a number of different preferences, but I'm going to start with the general preference file. There are literally 100 different preferences that you can specify in Premiere Pro 2. Some will affect how things are displayed, some will affect where files are saved, and some will affect how often your files are automatically saved. Keep in mind, anything that you specify in the preferences dialog box here will remain in place for every file that you open, not just for the existing project, but for every project. While there are 100 different preferences, we're going to look at just the essential preferences that you really should know before venturing out in the Premiere Pro 2 world. My first one I like to go to is the autosave preferences. And that asks you, do you want to automatically save your projects? And the answer is, oh heck yes. In Premiere Pro 2, you can't always predict when it's going to crash. Knock on wood, that it's never going to crash, but it's a good idea to automatically save your projects every so often. Premiere Pro 2 defaults to 20 minutes. I'm a little bit more cautious, and I'm going to set that to 5 minutes. And then Premiere Pro 2 asks me, okay, how many project versions should I save? Traditionally, I don't need to go back 5 project versions. Once I've made that many changes, I know I'm going to keep those changes. So I'm going to say go ahead and just save the most recent 3 project versions, for example. The next preference that I like to specify are the scratch disks preferences. These specify where the temporary files will go. For example, if you're rendering video or audio, it'll save those temporary renders in the video previews and audio previews location. If you have some files that don't match the format of the project, then Premiere Pro 2 has to convert them, and it saves the temporary converted files into the media cache directory. If you're doing DVD encoding, when it's time to export a DVD, Premiere Pro 2 saves that into the DVD encoding directory. Premiere Pro 2 lets you specify one of 3 different places. You can save it in My Documents, you can save it in the same folder where your project exists, or you can click Custom and browse and find your own folder. However, for now, I'm going to leave these set to Same as Project. It's up to you if you want to save these with the project or in a custom directory. No matter what you choose, I recommend you don't choose My Documents. That's because if you happen to have a separate hard drive, it's best to save all of your project files and your scratch disks on the separate hard drive. However, your My Documents folder may be on your primary hard drive, and that's going to quickly fill up your My Documents folder with a bunch of unnecessary and unwanted files. So for now, you can leave everything set to Same as Project. And finally, the last essential preference that you may want to use is the user interface preference. And this controls the brightness of the background of the user interface. For example, if you want to go with a lighter shade of gray or silver, you can make that background bright. If you want to make it darker, you can make it nice and dark. And of course, if you want to return to the default brightness, you can click the default brightness button. You can also use the Windows background color if you so prefer. However, I'm going to uncheck that and leave it set to the default brightness. Those are the primary preferences that I like to specify, and keep in mind, whatever settings you choose here are going to remain that way for all of your future projects until you change them again. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and I'm going to choose File, Close, before I move on to the next project.